Take a deep breath. Each time you inhale, your lungs take in a variety of gases. Among them, methane, helium, neon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and argon, just to name a few. But don't be alarmed. We only use the oxygen, which makes up approximately 21% of the air. The most abundant gas is nitrogen, at about 78%. And at a little less than 1%, argon comes in a distant third. While we don't directly use the nitrogen in the air we breathe, nitrogen combined with other elements is essential for animal and plant life. Nitrogen and argon also play important roles in industry. Nitrogen is widely used to manufacture chemicals, pharmaceuticals, steel, aluminum, glass, ceramics, and paper. It's used in petroleum processing, in the healthcare industry, and in the rapid freezing and preservation of food products. Argon is used inside fluorescent and incandescent light bulbs, in gas welding, in atmosphere controls for furnaces, laboratory research, and integrated circuit protection, just to name a few. As the largest industrial gases company in North and South America, and one of the largest worldwide, Praxair is providing this video to help raise awareness about the safe use and handling of nitrogen and argon. We will review nitrogen and argon's physical properties, explain their potential hazards, and will describe the precautions you need to be aware of when working near or handling nitrogen and argon. Additional information can be found in Praxair's publication, Storage and Safe Handling of Nitrogen and Argon, our current material safety data sheets, on container labels for nitrogen and argon, and in your company's safety program. Along with these resources, Praxair's commitment to safety includes a response system called the Local Emergency Assistance Program, or LEAP for short. This program allows you to get immediate help with just a phone call. A call to the LEAP emergency number puts you in contact with one of Praxair's emergency teams, people trained and ready to work with you to give you prompt, safe, and efficient solutions to your emergency situations. This video and these materials will help raise your awareness about the right ways to handle nitrogen and argon and the safe ways to avoid the potential hazards associated with these gases. Nitrogen and argon do not burn, and they don't support combustion. They're known as inert gases, meaning they don't react with other materials under most conditions. As we mentioned before, we take these gases into our lungs every time we inhale. Both gases are colorless and odorless, which means it's difficult to detect their presence. Under cryogenic conditions, they become liquid, minus 320 degrees Fahrenheit for nitrogen and minus 302 degrees Fahrenheit for argon. With these properties in mind, you'd think these two gases would be perfectly safe to work with. But that's not necessarily true. If mishandled, they can present serious safety problems. That's why it's important to understand their potential hazards. There are three primary hazards associated with nitrogen and argon: asphyxiation, high pressure, and extreme low temperature. When you're working outdoors, small releases of nitrogen or argon may not create a hazard because of dispersion and air turnover, which normally results in an adequate oxygen supply. But if nitrogen or argon is introduced in a confined space, they can displace oxygen to the point that there's no longer enough oxygen to keep you alive. Asphyxiation happens when you breathe air that doesn't have enough oxygen to sustain life. Many of us associate asphyxiation with choking and the struggle for air. But any situation where oxygen levels fall below 19.5% can be dangerous. As oxygen levels decrease, You can lose consciousness and possibly your life without realizing there's a problem. You don't stop breathing, you continue breathing, but what you're taking in doesn't have enough oxygen to sustain life. What is a confined space? According to OSHA, a confined space is an area that is large enough and configured so an employee can enter and perform work. It has limited or restricted entrances and exits, and it's not designed for continuous human occupancy. It may also have poor air circulation. Confined spaces come in many forms, and they can be indoors or outdoors, such as the inside of a chemical reactor vessel, a rail car, or a storage tank. Even spaces that are usually considered safe, like sewers, tunnels, or vaults, can be confined spaces, where gases other than air can leak in and reduce oxygen levels. When oxygen levels fall below 12%, a person can become unconscious immediately and die within minutes. With argon, there is an added danger. Unlike nitrogen, which has about the same molecular weight as air, argon is significantly heavier, which means it can literally creep up on you. When it's released in a confined area, it starts at the bottom and eventually fills up the space, displacing the air. A small flow of argon could eventually work its way past your ankles, your knees, and your chest, all the way up to your mouth and nostrils, where it goes right back down into your lungs. Argon can stay in a confined space like a tank for a long time, even when the top is open. That's because the lighter air cannot displace the heavier gas. So while a tank might look empty, the atmosphere inside could remain dangerous, even after several days. The second potential hazard exists because closed systems for nitrogen and argon are pressurized. Any gas under pressure can be dangerous, even air. If liquid nitrogen or argon gets trapped between closed valves, they can eventually warm and expand to about 700 times their original volume. Suddenly, you have a ruptured pipe and quite possibly injured workers. For this reason, nitrogen and argon containers and piping systems are designed and built to strict specifications and include pressure relief valves that vent gas safely if the pressure rises too greatly. An accidental release of pressurized nitrogen or argon can propel objects through the air at high speeds, severely injuring a person working nearby. The cold vapor can cause frostbite, which brings us to our next hazard. Rounding out our trio of potential hazards is the extremely low temperature of liquid nitrogen and argon. Remember, nitrogen becomes a liquid at minus 320 degrees Fahrenheit and argon at minus 302 degrees Fahrenheit. As a result, cold piping and equipment, cold gas vapors, and liquid nitrogen and argon all present low-temperature hazards. Skin contact with any of these sources, even for a very short time, can result in severe frostbite. And if you try to pull away, your frozen skin will likely tear off and remain stuck to the metal. Materials that are safe to use in normal conditions may become unsafe when exposed to extreme cold. This racquetball illustrates the effect. Rubber, plastic, and some metals that are durable at room temperature can easily shatter when exposed to liquid nitrogen or argon. Similarly, carbon steel, which is very strong under normal conditions, becomes brittle and loses its strength. Asphyxiation, high pressure, extreme low temperatures. Each one of these hazards can be minimized or eliminated with proper precautions. As we discussed, some of the greatest asphyxiation hazards are associated with confined spaces. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, has very strict standards that define procedures for confined space entry, including measures that address asphyxiation hazards. The standard requires companies to identify confined spaces and their hazards, develop a written confined space entry plan, train appropriate employees to safely perform entry, and provide the tools and equipment for the confined space entry team. Some key elements of the Confined Space Entry Standard deal with entry permit requirements, monitoring air for oxygen levels and hazardous gases, communication procedures, ventilation, personal protective equipment, and rescue procedures, to name a few. So it's critical to identify the confined spaces where you work and follow your company's confined space entry plan as required by OSHA. An important confined space precaution is the monitoring of oxygen levels inside the confined space with an appropriate gas detector. Not below 19.5% and not above 23.5%. If the oxygen level doesn't fall within this safety zone, you'll need to purge the entire area with air or provide workers with air-supplied respirators so they can do their jobs safely. Don't rely on purifying respirators like dust masks or gas masks. They won't do the job. It's also important to be aware of any sources of gas, electricity, hydraulics, pneumatics, or other hazardous energy sources that may be entering the confined space. They may have to be disconnected and locked out according to OSHA's lockout-tagout standard. Following your company's lockout-tagout procedures is one key to working safely with nitrogen and argon. The lockout-tagout standard provides procedures for companies to develop an energy control plan, which identifies workplace hazardous energy sources, including high-pressure gases. The Energy Control Plan also includes procedures for controlling potential energy releases. Nitrogen and argon are typically stored under high pressure. Tanks and piping systems are designed and built to strict specifications to manage the pressure and must be installed by qualified personnel. Pressure relief valves are installed at strategic locations throughout the system. There are a number of precautions related to spills or leaks of nitrogen or argon. Make sure a trained and qualified person inspects your system for leaks or damage on a regular basis. If there is a leak or spill, it's important to isolate the leak or spill area and evacuate personnel from the area. Contact the appropriate fire and emergency response personnel or notify the emergency team at Praxair. Don't try and do it yourself unless you've been trained and are qualified to do so. Since nitrogen and argon gases are colorless and odorless, the only evidence of a spill or leak may be a hissing noise and the formation of frost or fog clouds. Remember, the temperature of liquid nitrogen is minus 320 degrees Fahrenheit and argon minus 302 degrees Fahrenheit. Wearing the proper personal protective clothing and equipment is key to avoiding low-temperature hazards. Typically, this includes goggles or safety glasses with side shields, covered by a full face shield, insulated gauntlet gloves, and fire-resistant long-sleeve shirt and trousers without cuffs. The type of work being performed and your company's safety policies will determine the specific PPE to be used. As stated earlier, some materials become extremely brittle when exposed to the extreme cold of liquid nitrogen or argon. For this reason, only use containers, equipment, and systems designed to handle the extreme cold of cryogenic liquids. There are several general safe handling precautions to be aware of for nitrogen and argon. First of all, people who handle nitrogen and argon must be trained to understand their properties and its safe handling procedures. These gases must be stored and used in well-ventilated areas. They must be stored and used in areas where the temperature won't exceed 125 degrees Fahrenheit. And finally, containers of liquid nitrogen and argon, like other gas containers, should be handled carefully and kept in a secure, upright position with the valves fully protected. Additional important information about the safe use and handling of nitrogen and argon is available from your Praxair representative, the Praxair publication Storage and Safe Handling of Nitrogen and Argon, the material safety data sheets for nitrogen and argon, The Compressed Gas Association, the American Society for Testing and Materials, the National Fire Protection Association, and the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. Working with nitrogen and argon doesn't have to be a hazardous venture. Awareness and understanding of their properties and their safety precautions will help you work safely with nitrogen and argon.